But yes, when we are trying to establish and maintain emotional boundaries, recognize, like, check in with yourself. Always check in with yourself. What comes up for you as you're having these conversations? How can you ground yourself in the moment? How can we literally stop, take a step back, take a deep breath, observe what's happening both inside of ourselves as well as what's happening in our environments, and then proceed mindfully? How do we make an informed decision based upon what's happening both internally and externally as well? Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Legacy Speaks. My name is Sierra Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and emotional wellness coach. Today we're going to get into some Q&A. I had an amazing opportunity to be able to do one of my trainings in boundaries in the workplace, and there were a couple of questions that came up that I felt like they were necessary to share here on the platform. But before we dive right in, I need you to hit that subscription button below. That way you can stay up to date on newly released content on a regular basis. So let's dive right in. For those of you who have been following me for quite some time, you guys know that I do a number of trainings like boundaries in the workplace, how to cope with workplace stress, things of that nature. And I love having the opportunity to help working professionals as well as their organizations navigate different times, right? Whether it's transitioning from working in person to working from home, or maybe even dealing with suicidality in the workplace. I love helping professionals overcome these emotional wellness concerns, because obviously if one is not holistically well, then that impacts their ability to show up confidently in their work environments, as well as for their teams, as well as for their projects. Here's an opportunity for us to dive in a little bit deeper, and feel free to send some additional questions. You can contact me in the link below. You could also reach out to me via legacysbks.com/links to stay connected, all things Legacy Speaks. Now, the first question that was received was, okay, hey, I have a mental health diagnosis. Should I showcase that or share that with my employer? If so, how do I go about having that conversation? And one, that's a beautiful conversation. I am really not big on the shoulds, right? When we think about that word should, or these should statements, they create these unrealistic expectations of ourselves. And so it doesn't give us an opportunity to be able to look at the different approaches to answering this question. Rather than having the should, let's see what you can do. What are you comfortable with? For anybody with a mental health diagnosis or mental health concerns, check in with yourself and identify what is it that you are specifically comfortable with sharing. This goes into the concept of emotional boundaries, identifying what it is that you're willing to share at what time, as well as with what particular person or which person's at hand. Once you're able to identify whether or not you are comfortable with sharing your mental health diagnosis, consider the intent, right? What is the purpose of you sharing your diagnosis with someone? Is this an opportunity for you to build a connection through self-disclosure, recognizing that you see another coworker or maybe even colleague navigating their mental health concerns in a different way, and so you're wanting to be able to connect with them to provide them support and reassurance? All right, cool. Are you finding that your symptoms are encroaching in your productivity or the way that you show up in work? Well, maybe you would want to share that with your supervisor or maybe even HR so that they can best support you in the manner that you need. There's a number of resources in the workplace, whether it's your employee assistance program, maybe even your HSA, which is your health savings account, or maybe your FSA, which is your flexible spending account. And then even with your EAPs, there are a number of benefit programs that will help to cover your mental health sessions or sessions for therapy. Usually too, even with EAPs, they have clinicians on site or maybe even contract therapists that can help you with navigating your mental health concerns. This is very key too, because oftentimes when we think about therapy, we're thinking, okay, I'm just going to a therapist to talk. Well, not necessarily. Therapists help with the psychoeducational component, meaning that they help you with skills acquisition. A trained licensed clinician is going to help you with those self-advocacy skills. They're going to teach you how to implement boundaries. They're going to teach you how to maintain those boundaries. They're also going to teach you how to communicate effectively, how to have that confidence, or how to build that self-esteem in the workplace. So once again, identify what is it that you're comfortable with sharing. Identify what is the intent on sharing, and then also consider the workplace environment, the culture of the environment. If the environment is toxic in nature, maybe reconsidering sharing, because oftentimes when we're sharing, we find ourselves in the place of like, okay, I shared this thing and now what I've shared has been weaponized or utilized against me. Unfortunately, even though we have the ADA, which is the American Disability Act, nobody can be discriminated against, especially if you have some type of health condition or mental health condition of any kind. However, that does not negate the tendency of people having their own preconceived notions, their biases, and their pervasive stigmas. With that being said, these are the things to consider before disclosing your mental health diagnosis in the workplace. And even then too, I also encourage widening the scope of possibility. On one end, we're talking about like toxic work environments, but there are also some positive, healthy work environments, the ones that perpetuate wellness, the ones that champion wellness, the ones that see the whole person and for who they are and not just their diagnosis. If you happen to be in those spaces, consider figuring out who can you speak to, who are you comfortable with speaking with. It may not always be a supervisor, but maybe you have that workplace bestie, maybe you have that workplace colleague, maybe you have somebody in a different time zone, in a different department, especially if you guys are working from home but are on the same team. Consider what allies you do have in the workplace so that you can be able to talk about those things without feeling like you can't show up in your full authentic self or share these certain aspects with yourself. I know there are some work environments where people feel as though everyone is very tight-knit, they feel as though they're family. If you have that, great. Shout out to you for having that. Shout out to you for getting plugged in and being able to be fully engaged in those types of environments. But I would definitely say, once again, figure out what you're comfortable with, what's the intent, what's the purpose behind it, where resources are available to help support you in your mental health related concerns, and then also what are some actual levels of support there, whether it's a supervisor, someone in HR, or maybe even a workplace friend. This year has been a whirlwind, hasn't it? And I'm pretty sure that you and your business have had to make a number of changes as a result of the pandemic. But I need you to get really present right now. Let's tap into the here and now in this very moment. When was the last time you truly checked in on your team? As a matter of fact, when was the last time that you truly thought about how you and your team are mentally and emotionally navigating through all of the adjustments that are taking place? But guess what? I'm here to help with that. Hi, my name is Sierra Hillsman, and I'm a licensed professional counselor and certified clinical trauma professional. I work with small businesses and corporations by helping their teams explore their presenting concerns. That way we can increase employee engagement and improve productivity overall. This can be done through in-person or online lunch and learn events, corporate workshops, and organizational seminars. Click the link below. That way you can start to learn how to truly invest in the overall mental and emotional wellness of your team. Speaking of which, another question that came up was, how do I set emotional boundaries in the workplace? And this is very important. I know we just recently talked about what are emotional boundaries, but essentially emotional boundaries, once again, are you identifying what feelings or maybe even thoughts you're willing to share with other people in the workplace. Not only which ones you're willing to share, but also with whom and at what point in the relationship, or maybe even context, like what spaces you're willing to talk about these things in, right? I know what it feels like to be at work and you have like these awkward situations where everybody is just sharing their personal business, and then they turn to you and they look at you like, okay, so you're not gonna share it too? And it's like, no, okay, this is not that type of party. I'm just here listening. It's all good. And I definitely encourage you, if you are that individual who feels awkward or maybe even feels uncomfortable with sharing in the workplace, please, I want to normalize your experience. Please do not feel pressure to answer questions that you are not comfortable with sharing. you can easily divert or maybe even switch energies, or maybe even change the conversation to something that you're more comfortable with. Or you can simply say, hey, at this present time, I don't feel comfortable with talking about this. Nothing against you guys. Thank you so much for your honesty and transparency in this particular moment. However, I'm currently not in that space. Or, hey, you know, this is a sensitive subject for me. Is it possible for us to talk about something else? Figure out what messaging you would like to leverage during those times, because I totally get it. Have a couple of responses or default responses in your back pocket so that you can whip them out. But yes, when we are trying to establish and maintain emotional boundaries, recognize, like, check in with yourself. Always check in with yourself. What comes up for you as you're having these conversations? How can you ground yourself in the moment? How can we literally stop, take a step back, take a deep breath, observe what's happening both inside of ourselves as well as what's happening in our environments, and then proceed mindfully? How do we make an informed decision based upon what's happening both internally and externally as well? And when we're talking about emotional boundaries, it's not to say that you aren't willing to share. Maybe you're not willing to share with that particular group of people or with that specific person, and that's okay. So be confident in your decision. Please be confident in who you are and what you feel comfortable with, because ultimately you really want to maintain emotional and psychological safety in the workplace. Yeah. Now, the next question that came up was, hey, I'm very long-winded. How can I better communicate my thoughts effectively? This is so good because I love talking about communication. There are 4 different components of communication: not only what we say, but how we say it, who we say it to, and in what context. When we're saying what we say, identify the messaging that you're trying to communicate. What is the overarching goal, or maybe even that theme or sentence that you're trying to communicate? Once you identify what it is that you're trying to communicate, let's figure out the wording, right? What are the words that we're going to utilize to convey this messaging? After that, consider how we're going to say it. How we say it includes your rate of speech, your intonation, the rhythm, the cadence of it all. How are you going to say what it is that you're trying to say? We understand it's one thing to say, please have this particular project done by Friday. It's another thing to say, please have this particular project done by Friday. You hear that? You hear that change? You know, one was very respectful, another one was a bit spicy in nature. Listen, sorry, I had to pause. I felt that. Can you imagine somebody talking to you like that? Oh no, baby. Yes, so something to consider, right? So how we say it is just as important as what we say. Then who we say it to, right? So your audience, who are you talking to? Right? And when we're talking about who are we talking to, we're talking about relationship, the intimacy, the depth of that relationship. How long have you known them? How do you communicate with them typically? What is your relationship like we talked about? The way that you communicate with family is going to be different from the way that you communicate with a colleague or coworker. The way that you communicate with the CEO of a company is going to be different from the way that you communicate with maybe the janitor or manager. I hope not. Treat everybody with respect, obviously, but you get my drift. The way that you communicate with people, it really just depends on your level of respect, also the level of intimacy that you have with them. So who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? You may switch up the tone, right? You may have like this very formal dialogue, and sometimes with the level of intimacy you might be less formal. You may be a little bit more relaxed. So think about that as well. Then we're talking about context, right? The relevancy of it all, right? Is what you're talking about relevant to the situation or set of circumstances at hand? The reason why this is so important is because you don't want who you're communicating to or with to get sidetracked, or maybe even to start to bring in information that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. And you don't also want to get lost in the sauce. You want to make sure that you're very clear, concise, and direct. Another thing when we're talking about not only just the 4 components of communication, but the types of questions, You have your open-ended questions as well as your closed-ended questions. So if you're the individual who's concerned about being long-winded, think about, okay, how can I take a step back, take a deep breath, analyze the conversation at hand? What was being asked of me? How can I avoid giving unnecessary details that have nothing to do with what I'm talking about? What are some things that I can cut off or trim off? How can I trim the fat and cut the fluff? Right? Immediately think of that. And when we're talking about open-ended or closed-ended questions are more of like yes or no or one direct responses. Open-ended questions are going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more. Did you go to the store today? That's more of a yes or no question. Now, when we're talking about, okay, well, when you went to the store today, what did you see? That's different because you could have seen 50 million things on your way into the store or even when you got into the store. Hey, lovely, shout out to you because I know mental and emotional wellness is important to you. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But lean in really quickly because I know sometimes it's really hard to create a plan and actually sticking to it. So let's take your mental health to another level. Ever wonder what keeps you from fully executing? Ever wonder how you can build the confidence for decision making? Well, guess what? You're not alone and I'm here to help. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com for your free mental health plan. It'll give you practical strategies for addressing your current mental health needs. But first, you got to tap in. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com to receive your free mental health action plan today. Do it right now. mentalhealthgoals.com. See you soon. Just to wrap that response up, we're considering the 4 components of communication, not only what we say, how we say it, who we say it to, and in what context. But we're also thinking about the questions that are being asked of us. It doesn't require a direct response. Is it a closed-ended question or an open-ended question? And even for those open-ended questions, how can I respond directly to what is being asked of me? Instead of like in Georgia or in Metro Atlanta, we talk about how can we take 75 rather than taking 285. 75 is more of a north and south kind of interstate, well, whereas 285 is you're going literally all over the city of Atlanta just to get to the original point at hand. All right. For my ATLians out there, you get what I'm talking about. Exactly. Oh wow, that Q&A went super quick. I really wasn't expecting it, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. I really did. Did you enjoy it? I hope you did. If you did, I need you to hit that like button to also share this with somebody. But most importantly, thank you so much for the opportunity to serve you guys, and thank you so much for allowing me to be able to show up in this space. Y'all already know that I love all things mental health, so if there are any additional questions, feel free to hit me up in my inbox. Also, you can drop them in the comment section below. If anything resonated with you, let me know in the comment section. Or also, once again, if it resonated with you, then that obviously means that you need to share. And once again, you also need to hit that like button, okay? Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and definitely stay connected via Legacy SBKS on everything. If you enjoyed this Q&A that came from a previous training and you might be thinking, wow, I want you to come train me on how to navigate boundaries, communication, things of that nature, please hit me up. Head over to hello@legacysbks.com to shoot me some information about the event that you're trying to put on for your organization. Also, don't forget to tap into additional resources like the Legacy Speaks podcast and other previous episodes here on the YouTube channel. This is Sierra Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and emotional wellness coach. Stay connected via Legacy SBKS on everything. Until next time.